want a second look.
Yeah, there's something about this one, isn't there? Familiar somehow.
We think we're stuck in a specific fragment in time, and we've been repeating that same fragment over and over again.
But the flirting's over, Sherlock. Daddy's had enough now.
Hello and welcome to You've Seen It Before, TV Reviews Connections of Mind. The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power is a new show on Amazon Prime from creators J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, based in the world of J.R.R. Tolkien. Set during the Second Age of Middle-earth, the enemy Morgoth has been defeated and a seeming peace has descended on Middle-earth. However, not everyone is convinced that a dark shadow has crept back into Middle-earth and things are conspiring to bring a new evil and darkness upon the Middle-earth once again. Now, this video review will contain spoilers of The Rings of Power Season 1. However, I'll be doing those after my spoiler-free thoughts and my letter grade, so if you have not seen The Rings of Power yet, don't worry, I'll be doing my spoiler-free thoughts before I get into any spoilers. So with that in mind, let's get into some spoiler-free thoughts on The Rings of Power Season 1. Is it worth the watch? Is it worth your Prime subscription? Is it a good series overall? Is it a good addition to the Tolkien universe of live-action features? I would say yes, but this definitely requires some patience on the audience's front, because while there are 8 episodes in this first season, and really, if you're not familiar with J.R.R. Tolkien's world building and lore crafting, and if you've only ever seen the Lord of the Rings Peter Jackson movies, or even the Hobbit movies, you might not be used to how slow-paced this series is, especially in the beginning. Really, out of the 8 episodes, I would say things only really start to get going in around episode 5. And for those first 4 episodes, things move at pretty much a glacial pace, in my opinion. Yes, things are happening, but this season does a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to setting up the world, setting up the characters, moving pieces, moving people and places into their starting positions. Because I feel like this season in particular feels like a prequel to the prequel, if that makes sense, because this series is very much a prequel series to The Lord of the Rings, and really The Hobbit, especially, I guess, if we're going chronologically, because, again, this takes place in the Second Age of Middle-earth. It doesn't touch on the First Age of Middle-earth, really. It gives us some vague talking points at the very beginning, and then doesn't again. That's mainly due to rights issues with what Amazon was able to buy the rights to, for insane amounts of money, and what they didn't have rights to use. Namely, what they didn't have the rights to use was anything from the Silmarillion, and at least as far as we know. And I feel like that kind of tied their hands behind their backs a little bit, because while this series did inspire me to read the Silmarillion for the first time, and if you've never read it before, buckle up, because that thing is wow. But anyways, this series definitely has the feel of a lore-building series. And what I mean by a lore-building series is it's not so much about depicting the things that happened prior to what you know, which it is, but this is more trying to establish how things got to their starting positions that we were introduced to them the first time around. Namely, I feel like what the show's ultimately going to be building up to is that first 5 or 10 minutes that we had from the Fellowship of the Ring, namely the Battle of the Dagorlad Plains that was depicted in the Fellowship of the Ring, cutting the ring from Sauron's hand, because, like I said, the Rings of Power has to show certain things, like how did the rings get forged, for one, but also like how other things came to be. And this series does does a lot of that. But like I said, those first 4 episodes do a lot of the heavy lifting of establishing certain things, and it feels like events have a lot of inertia. Like, it takes a lot before things start to get moving. And for me, like I said, those first 4 episodes were rough for me. I was interested in where things were going but I was kept along by the fact that this series is gorgeous to look at. I mean, for all the insane money that we've heard about being put into the series, you see it on the screen because, I mean, for crying out loud, this series is beautiful when it looks to it. But story-wise, we have the characters that we're more familiar with, namely the two. I mean, there's really only 2 characters that people are going to be familiar with, or at least the general population, people watching this are going to be familiar with if they've only seen the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies, and that is Galadriel, played by Morfydd Clark, and Elrond, played by Robert Aramayo, and they do good jobs of it. However, I feel like Galadriel is closest that we have to a main character in this story because, I mean, once you get to the end of the season, she has the most complete arc of anyone, so I feel like I can safely say that she is the main character. She has the most to do from beginning to end of this season. And Elrond, he does a good job. He actually has a fair resemblance to a young Hugo Weaving, in my opinion, at least as close as you can get at this point. So I think that he does a good job on that. But really, everyone else, even from Elendil on Numenor, or there we have the Harfoots, which are the ancestors of the hobbits, they're proto-hobbits, if you will. They got good storylines there. However, me personally, I'm not a fan of how disparate these storylines are. You bounce things around so much that you, especially episode to episode, you'll have one episode that focuses on the Harfoots and a mysterious person known as the Stranger, and then you'll also have focus on Elrond and his relationship with Durin and the dwarves of Moria. So those will be 2 people in the one episode, but then you won't see anything about Galadriel or Numenor or the Southlands or any of those characters down there in the episode. And then the next episode will be the opposite. It'll focus all on Galadriel and the people of Numenor and then the Southlands, but nothing advancing on the other storylines. And if you like all the storylines equally, then that's tolerable in my opinion. However, if you gravitate more towards one character storyline than the other, I feel like that's going to be very frustrating. And it certainly was for me, especially in the first few episodes. Like I said, around episode 5 is when things start really picking up, and things actually, this sounds bad, but it's sort of it is a legitimate criticism in my opinion, things actually start happening. Because I swear, there's so many false starts in the first 4 episodes that, again, without spoilers, there's one storyline in particular where, alright, you're going one place and then you're delayed. You go to another place and then you're delayed. Alright, now we're at this place, we have to motivate people to go to another place, but then, nope, we're gonna stay here a little bit more. And then, alright, now we're starting to go. It's like, just get on with it already. I mean, that's my main, I feel like I'm not the only one feeling that, especially if you've seen the series, this season. But, like I said, I feel like if you're interested in the Lord of the Rings lore, there's enough here to keep you intrigued going on. There's a couple of mysteries throughout the series that get more satisfying conclusions than others, I feel like, but you get at least some conclusion by the end, resolution by the end of the season, or at least enough clues to keep you satisfied that before while we wait for season 2 to come around. But yeah, like I said, there's so much here that will keep you satisfied, or at least be interested to see how they depict certain things, or like, all right, how are they going to show this event from Middle-earth's history, or how are they going to get to this character? All right, we know that this character ends up here, so how do they get from point A to point B? That's the kind of stuff that I feel like is going to bring people back to Rings of Power in Season 2. I believe they've planned out to 5 seasons. That's how many I believe they've written out. But Season 2, I believe, is going to take another year or so or more to get out into the world, because they're shifting production from New Zealand to the UK for filming and production. So that's going to take some time on that. But for what we got right now, I would say, overall, as a Tolkien fan, as a fan of the Lord of the Rings in general, I would say this series is very much a intriguing a supplement to the main Peter Jackson films, and it keeps me engaged enough as of right now to figure out what's going to see what happens next, and to see how things resolve. And as always, it is a gorgeous series to look at. However, I feel like the pacing is going to continue to be an issue going through this, just because of how they're dealing with, you know, time jumps, and they're compressing time for certain things and drawing things out to a certain extent. And if they have to fill a certain amount of watch time for episodes, I feel like that might drag things out unnecessarily. So with that in mind, I would say Rings of Power Season 1, I'm going to give it a solid B. Because, yes, this is beautiful. B for beautiful, because this is beautiful to look at. I'm interested to see where things go ahead, but there's plenty of things that they need to iron out, and I think they need to work on expanding more going into Season 2 and beyond. So, those are my spoiler-free thoughts on Lord of the Rings of Power Season 1. Now let's get into some spoiler thoughts as certain plot developments and character arcs that may seem familiar to you, and where you may have seen them before. Now, I feel like this is going to be more of a general analysis because, as with many prequel movies or series that come out, this series, Rings of Power, shares a lot of the same issues that prequels have, namely putting characters that in peril in situations that it seems like they're going to die when we know for a fact that they don't die. Like a lot of the action with Galadriel, especially in the beginning and in the around season 6 or episode 6, I should say, where she's put in situations where she's an imminent threat. Like, we know she doesn't die. We know she doesn't get even as far as we know, grievously injured in any of these. So whenever we have like even a fake out thing of like, oh, is she really in danger? No, she's not. We know this. And, you know, Isildur especially, I feel like is the most egregious. Because in episode 7, I believe, yes, when they're dealing with the aftermath of Mount Doom erupting, which, by the way, yes, Mount Doom, the wave of heat and ash coming through it, yes, everyone's totally okay after that. That would definitely happen, and Galadriel's hair doesn't even seem terribly mussed from that. But Isildur especially, they have the whole thing where it's like, he's digging out survivors from this burning building, and then the roof collapses. Like, oh no, Isildur! It's like, yes, the guy who's very famous for cutting the ring off Sauron's hand. He's totally dead, guys, and now we have to wait, 2 years to see. Oh, hey, he was all right. If you've never seen or heard of anything about Lord of the Rings, that might come as a shock to you. But for everyone else in the world, it's like these are the kind of things that are really annoying, in my opinion. But also, like I said, one of the strengths of this series as a prequel to be interesting to see how people end up in their starting positions for where we're familiar with where their starting positions, especially in Lord of the Rings, especially in The Hobbit. But that can also be a weakness as well, because it feels like we know where their starting positions are come The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So the fact that we know it's going to take a couple more seasons for them to finally reach that position is going to be excruciating, I feel like, especially for Galadriel, especially for Elrond. And I feel like this can work best for some prequel series. Like, again, for better or worse, the Star Wars prequels did a good job of this, especially with Revenge of the Sith, when we get to see, all right, how do these characters, even if they get put into life or death situations where we know they don't die, how do they become what we know them to be when it comes to when we finally meet them again in A New Hope? That I feel like was some of the strengths of the prequel series and the prequel trilogy, and I feel like that's going to be one of the strengths of Rings of Power. However, for this season especially, it feels like a weakness in certain instances. So there's that to happen, but there's another parallel to be made with the Star Wars prequels, and that is with the character of the Stranger. And this might be an unpopular opinion in my feeling, but one of the main, there were the two main mysteries in this season. One is, who is Sauron? And the other is, who is the Stranger? Is the Stranger Sauron? I was one who was very convinced that the Stranger may well be Sauron, but because there was a lot of conflicting evidence throughout the season as to whether he was good or bad. But by the end, the fact that they just come out and say that he's Sauron, maybe it's like, oh, okay, so then he's not. But then they go to the point where it's like, all right, I'm a wizard, one of the Istari. It's like, okay, so he's one of the wizards. But then they get to the end and they make that cute little reference. It's like, oh, if you're in doubt, always follow your nose, which is a quote from Gandalf from Fellowship of the Ring. And one of the theories is, oh, stranger's Gandalf. As a lore hound, as someone who's at least familiar with the lore, we know for a fact that Gandalf does not show up in Middle-earth until 1,000 years into the Third Age. So it's going to be another, 1,000, 1,500 years, theoretically, before, 1,100 years, whatever, until Gandalf shows up properly in Middle-earth. However, there's enough wiggle room in Tolkien's notes to say that, yes, he could have shown up earlier, maybe under a different name. All right, fine. But then I think that runs us into the issue of a character that was around in a prequels, but it was also around in the original trilogy that had a whole lot of adventures in the prequels that they just never talk about, or just has no bearing on anything, apparently, or paints those interactions in the original trilogy in a whole different light, for better or for worse, usually for worse. And when I was talking about the Star Wars prequels, I was talking about R2-D2 specifically, where now we see, yes, he was in for all of those movies, and because he didn't get his memory wiped at the end of Revenge of the Sith, so that means now whenever we go back and rewatch, New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, we know that if he has any interaction with Darth Vader, it's like, oh yeah, your former master blew your head apart in A New Hope. It's like, oh man, and he knew that it was his former master too. So if this is actually Gandalf, it's like, okay, so he has all these former adventures that just never talks about in Lord of the Rings, never talks about in The Hobbit. Which, yes, he's a mysterious character in those, in the book and in those movies as well. But again, this feels like an unnecessary. I feel like they're going to write themselves into a corner before too long if they go that route. So I'm fearful of where that might go. I may be in the minority on that front, but we'll see how things progress on that front. But overall, yeah, those are my. I'm not going to go episode by episode on this. I thought Mount Doom exploding was. Wow, that was intense. That was excellent. I like the little details that they put in, the set dressing, and the fact that they're trying to make their own unique take on Middle-earth and the designs of Middle-earth and the races of Middle-earth, but they also keep they know enough to not hew too far away from the Peter Jackson thing, just because that's so defined Middle-earth for most everyone watching this. So you can see it in such details as even Elendil's sword in. We don't not necessarily know if that's Narsil in the series, but it looks close enough that's like, all right, even if that's their version of Narsil, it looks close enough to what we saw in the Peter Jackson movies. That's like, all right, I can buy that, but again, that brings me to my next fear is that once again they shot season 1 in New Zealand. However, because of all the stuff that went on with delays and reshoots due to COVID in New Zealand, now they're moving to the UK, and I'm like, the UK, I'm sure it has great landscapes and all, especially for if the Hardfoots eventually make it to what's going to be the Shire, but the UK, I have a hard time buying it as Middle-earth, at least, from what I know for right now. And that means to me that they're going to rely more heavily on green screen or, was it the view, the LED back panel technology that they use for like Disney Plus shows like The Mandalorian. And I feel like that's going to diminish a lot of what we're going to get. I think that was one of the negatives of The Hobbit, that they had to rely so much on green screen and CGI landscapes that it looks worse than the Peter Jackson ones, which were shot on location for the most part. And yeah, I'm fearful for that the visual effects might take a hit come season 2 and beyond. However, if Amazon's committed to pouring like close to $1 billion into each season, which I mean, hey, it's your guys' money, but maybe they can make it look even as good or even better in the next seasons. I mean, I'm open to it. What do you think of Rings of Power Season 1? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What about my analysis? Do you agree, disagree? Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate whatever audience I can get. Be sure to look for my other TV review that I released here for She-Hulk Attorney at Law from Disney Plus, and also look for my next movie review, which will be for Black Adam, which comes out October 21st. It was a bit of a desert of content in September and early October, but now things are starting to pick up again. I'm glad to be making these kind of reviews again. And if you like this video or any other video on my channel, please give me a like, share, and especially subscribe. I would very much appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for watching, but just remember, there is nothing new under the sun. And yes, you have seen it before.